Today we have our just a training webinar. Should only be about 30 minutes or so, where we'll be going through some of the data collection validation and automated validation possibilities within Tag Inspector. Both the scans briefly, we'll run through some tag rules, but primarily within our RealTime module. So we can see some of the different options for setting up validations, how they work, what exactly is being looked at, and how we can validate both tags as well as data layer and different objects that you might be setting on the page, which can be super, super helpful when it comes to your analytics platforms. So to get started here with the scan reports, as many of you know and love, this is obviously the interface with our Tag Inspector scanner module to access your tag rules. And if you want to create a new one, or if you want to go access and maybe edit a tag rule that you have set up currently, you come over here on the left side of the user interface, tag rules section, which will take you in and will just be able to provide you a list of any past tag rules that you have created. Now, what I always encourage individuals to do is, if you have an overarching global tag policy, obviously have a tag rule for that, but you might have different sections of your site that have different requirements. It might allow different types of platforms or require different platforms to be loading. Create different tag rules for those different things. If you set up scheduled scans then and just apply those tag rules, what you're able to do is fully automate that ongoing monitoring process. So for example, and let's go ahead and hop into an actual rule here. But using this as an example, what we're saying is that Google Universal Analytics as well as this add parlor tag are both allowed. We have a whitelist rule here. So the two different types of rule types are the whitelist rule, which you can define anything as allowed or required. Anything outside of what's defined as allowed or required that's loading on the site is going to be flagged. And you're going to get a violation for that, or a tag error for that, because it hasn't been specified as being a part of that whitelist. The second type of tag rule is a blacklist, where we're saying that everything is allowed unless it's specified is not allowed. But at the same time, everything's allowed unless it's specified as required. If it is specified as required and is missing, then that's going to also kick out a tag rule. So blacklist rule, more helpful for specific projects, or making sure that those key required tags that are loading on your site, such as your analytics platform, are in fact always there. You can also, though, get some of that required functionality with the whitelist rule as well if you have a full tag policy built out. So we have our different tags that are defined as allowed or required. I can add additional conditions. So I could say something like, I don't know, double click is required, and it's required to be loaded through my tag management system. So something like a Google Tag Manager or Telium, Insighten, one of those. So I have all this flexibility with these rules. I can also add additional conditions for URL contains. But I create these. I create my policy. I take what I've defined internally at the business as allowed, required. This is what the tag behavior should look like. And I translate that into these rules. Again, I apply this different tag rule when I'm creating scans, and then we let our system automatically go through and check against whatever you have defined. So if I save this tag rule, it's test 1. I come back here and I go up to start a new scan. My recommendation again is always to schedule these. So I go through step 1 of a new scan. Obviously, I enter in my site. Step 2, I apply any advanced options. That is where you apply your tag rule. So I go in, advanced options, apply a policy to the scan, the one I just created, test 1. I can define to scan specific pages, remove query strings, rewrite URLs. And most importantly, like I mentioned, I applied that policy. I go to my next step. I schedule this to run, say, on a weekly basis. Begin the scan. It's now queued. That's going to run on a weekly basis. And as soon as that result becomes available, I can set that up to receive an email. I will also then have an additional section within my report that is going to flag. That's going to flag any of those tag errors. So policy errors up here, if I have any, I'm going to have a new section up here. And in this particular scan, I had no policy errors. Site was set up well. If there are, those will just be listed here with all the errors that occurred. Again, biggest keys here with the tag rules and the scans is checking against that tag policy, making sure your governance is being followed, making sure and troubleshooting any specific issues with a required tag. Is it there? Is it not there? Or checking for those really high value issues or high value tags on a regular basis. Now, for more granular validation, that's where we get into our Tag Inspector real-time validation rules. And this is what I really wanted to focus on today. So Tag Inspector real-time, obviously, it works a little bit different than the scans. Scans we're going through, our crawler is hitting each page, our scanner simulating a user, we're loading the page and then collecting requests. But it's still a simulation. It's still a scanner. It's under ideal, circumstances, the whole nine. With real-time, it's our tag-based solution. So it's sitting there on each page as live users go through, interact with each page, click on each button. We're recording all the different requests and all the information that's being sent up by the tags in that context. So what this allows us to do is test and validate tag behavior at a massive, massive scale. So as opposed to running a scan, and even if you go through twice, once as a new user, once as a returning user, it's still hitting a particular page 2 times. If you're setting up a validation rule, making sure that transaction information is always being collected by your analytics platform within real time, we're able to validate on that particular confirmation page all the time. So for every single user and every single page load that goes through, and then you're able to, within the validation rule reporting here, identify all instances of a validation passing, all instances of it failing, what the failure rate is, where it's happening, all that good stuff. So due to the power here and also the granularity that you're able to check out, which we'll see here in a second, I wanted to really focus on the validation rules within real time here today. So in order to create validation rules within real time, first, obviously, you have to be in the RealTime module. So at the top of the user interface, you go over, you click on real-time. That's going to take you to that dashboard page that we were just at. And then on the left side of the UI, you can click on validation rules, which is going to take you into validation rule reporting. Now, any site that you have access to on your account, you will then see the status of all rules that you have created or you have applied. So that allows you to, in one central area, even if you're managing multiple domains or multiple sites, or you have access to a handful of different organizations, you can see what does the status of all these different rules look like right now. Now, in terms of what it is that we're validating, you can create a new rule or edit an existing rule. And what that's going to bring you into is this create rule interface. So you can name a rule, anything. Test, we'll call it example. Validation rule example, analytics. So what is it exactly that you're able to validate here? So 3 different things. What we're doing in this first conditioning is defining what should be happening, what is required to be happening. So we have the ability to, out of the box, we can set up different custom macros on here as well, a lot of flexibility, but you can validate either a tag request, you can validate a global JavaScript variable, as well as a current URL, so the URL of the page that you're on. So for a tag request, what we're doing here is you're setting a rule or you're setting a requirement around a tag request. So something as general as Google Analytics, required to send a request on the page. You can define a parameter that should be set. You can define containing a parameter value. So TID, UA, whatever your UA number is. And what this is going to do, if it's a static value that should be sent, so in the Google Analytics case, if you're looking for a specific UA ID or specific account ID or property ID, I guess, that would be deployed on across an entire site, I'd be looking for that. So I'll be looking for the TID equaling this, and that should be on every single page. Or I can say that HTTP request matches regex. Now, where this comes in most handy is things like, I know a lot of clients use DoubleClick, for example. Now, the DoubleClick request is a little bit unique in that it has the actual DoubleClick ID. So you might have multiple different DoubleClick tags on your site, but for a specific campaign, only a certain DoubleClick tag should be that corresponds to that campaign should be on those pages. You can use this HTTP request matches regex for that because the actual tag ID is contained within as the subdomain of the request domain. So we're going to use that there as opposed to trying to define contains a parameter value that you would for like an analytics platform. Now, the other super common context here is, again, validating any tags that you have on a confirmation page down to a granular level, such as your analytics platform, collecting a parameter like TR, which is transaction revenue, and doing that again on a confirmation page using my second set of conditions down here. That's for testing or validating a tag request. I can also set this up for a global JavaScript variable. And what this is I'm looking for a JavaScript object that would be on the page. So very common would be something like your data layer. So I define exactly what that object is named on the page. And I'm saying that my data layer should equal, contain, start with, match regex, does not match regex. Usually we're using a contains here, and then we're looking for some new parameter that you have set up or that should be being pushed to that particular object on a specific page or upon a user completing a specific action. So if you were setting up and deploying a brand new data layer, making sure that everything is actually being populated there, being populated with the proper value, the different variables, values within that data layer object are following the correct nomenclature that you have set up or the proper pattern. All of that here is possible with this validation rule. Now, the second condition that I had alluded to, so when exactly should a rule be applied? So I can say high level, all pages. Something like my analytics platform that should be loading, should be collecting information across every single page. I can have a general high level rule for that. So this rule should be applied across every single page. I can also define things such as session landing page, first session refer, last session refer, number of user visits, page views, or what is most common down here is using things like the global JavaScript variable, user click on a DOM element, or the current URL. So with something like a current URL, I could say contains, and then whatever it is that matches the pattern of your confirmation page in this particular context. Contains confirmation. I would apply this rule. What we'd be looking for is here I'm looking whenever a user hits a URL that contains /confirmation, so my confirmation page. What our system is going to automatically do is look for a global JavaScript variable named the data layer. So I'm looking in the data layer and I'm looking for it to contain the key value pair here, page name, confirmation. So I'm validating proper data layer implementation on my confirmation page or my conversion page. Likewise, we can say global JavaScript variable, data layer, contains page name confirmation. And then I can come up here and start looking at like a tag request. So using the same example as before, Google Analytics, setting a parameter for TR. So if I have within my tag management system, for example, if I have that, Google Analytics should fire and collect transaction information, including the transaction revenue, whenever a conversion or a purchase takes place. And because I have enhanced e-commerce, my development teams help me implement that e-commerce on my website. I should be having a push to my data layer that the page name, whenever the on a page load, whenever the page name equals confirmation, that is what's going to trigger my transaction event to fire. Now, there's obviously different scenarios in which you could set this up, and there could be different conditions for that scenario. But if you mirror that scenario and that trigger or firing rule within your validation here in Tag Inspector, you're almost validating twice. So first, I'm validating that when this occurs, so on this page, Google Analytics is firing and collecting that parameter, that value. But if this validation rule isn't testing, I can also set an alert for a validation just happening being below a certain number. So not only am I testing the Google Analytics, I'm also testing that the data layer push is happening. If it's not, obviously it's going to cause my tag not to fire, and I'm not going to collect the information anyway. But at least now I know my issue isn't with the tag configuration, or isn't with what I'm doing within my tag management system. My issue is on the page and not sending that proper information to the data layer. Now, in terms of when these different rules can be checked, you can set our system to check a rule either on the window unload event, which is what I always recommend. You're always looking for data to be sent by the time the user leaves the page, in which case, after that point, you're not going to be able to collect that information, which could be an error in and of itself, but we can give you insight there. So check that value during the window unload event. As long as the second for when the rule should be applied condition is met, we're going to run that validation. We're going to tell you true or false, and then you're going to be able to go in and see, if it is a pass or if it is a failure, what was the context, which I'll show you here now. So I create a rule, I apply it to a site, and within minutes, that rule is going to start validating. So if I come in here and I'm looking for, a particular violation. So for this on our taginspector.com site, and this is just a pure example, all those in there are, but for a validation failure, I have a rule set up that if the refer to one of our subdomains is not set to taginspector.com, then that's going to kick out the violation. So whenever you click on that number, so the pure number of validation failures, what you're then able to come in and see is all page loads on which that validation failed. For each page load, I'm able to see the URL on which it happened, the browser name, browser version, time of the occurrence of that particular failure. And then I can start digging into, okay, what actually did happen on that page load? So I can see here if I have a rule that's pointed to the data layer or an object on a page, I can click on parameters and see just a printout of what the data layer did contain. What did that look like on that window unload event? And then I can also come in here and see the page details, which is going to be my page detail reporting. And in my page detail reporting, I can see all hits sent by all tags on that particular page load. So I can see what behavior did happen, as well as timing information for each hit. So a very common failure that we'll see is around latency issues. So there might just be so many requests that are being sent on a particular page that whatever it is that you are trying to load is firing too late in the page, and it doesn't have a chance to fully execute that request or send up the data that it's requesting or return whatever it is that it's requesting. So in that context, yes, you have a tag, you have it configured properly, it's set to fire on a particular page. If you go there, yourself, it might fire for you, but say 15% of the time it's not. We're able to see that 15%, you're able to see under what conditions that 15% are following. So is it users from a particular location with a particular browser type, browser version? Is it only during one particular time of the day, maybe when your peak time is happening? I can see all that information here within the reports. I can see the parameters, so the data that's being collected, and all that. Now, taking this one step further, obviously those validations are always happening, but you can also come in here and configure alerts to let you know as soon as something goes into an error state. So I can name my alert, I select the rule that I'm wanting to test, and then then come down and set the conditions for when you want that notification to happen. So I can come in here and say if my failure count, usually we'll say a failure rate, depending on the tag, depending on the site, might be the failure rate being above 5% within the course of the last 5 hours. I want to check across my entire site, and then I can set up a number of emails on here. So I can have all the individuals on that team that are responsible for that particular tag and are going to want to know if it's ever failing or not collecting information and want to know, soon. I can create that alert. I can apply it to test that rule. And what our alert system will then do, so the rule is constantly validating. Our system's validating for every single user, every single page load, as long as we're collecting every single hit. In that case, each time that a rule passes, we're recording that. Each time that it fails, we're recording that, and then constantly calculating that error rate for every single positive or negative validation. So we have the error rate, and what we're then telling our system is to look, okay, over the last 5 hours, what is that error rate for that rule? Is it 3%, 4%, 5%? With this particular alert that I have configured here, we're looking for that error rate over the last 5 hours, and we're checking the condition every hour. So every single hour, our system is going to run through this and look at this particular validation rule, look over the last 5 hours of time, and if the error rate over the last 5 hours is above 5, we're going to send an alert notification to all the individuals or all the emails that are set up here to receive an alert for this configuration. So I can know within an hour if my analytics platform stopped collecting transaction information, or I can know within an hour that a conversion tag for a campaign stopped collecting information. I can also then have within the real-time reporting and the validation rules reporting the ability to go in and identify, okay, what exactly is happening? Why is this occurring? So I can begin to start remediating any of these sorts of issues. So that's really the power of the validation rules, the power of the real-time engine in general. I wanted to go through that here today for the training standpoint, just because we don't have quite as much content around there. And we also don't have as many people really leveraging and utilizing that functionality. So So I hope this was helpful. I did record the session today, so if you have any questions at all on the validation rules, either in the scans as well as within real time, what's possible, you have a specific use case that you want to run by me, see, hey, can you actually help with this? Please shoot me an email, drop me a line. More than happy to set up an individual training call with anyone as well. So let me know what would be helpful, and we can make that happen. So I will open up the floor real quick. If anyone has any specific questions, I can answer those here quickly. Okay. It does not look like I have any. If any come up, like I mentioned, let me know. Just shoot me an email. Happy to answer anything. We have a team willing and able to help with any of these sorts of issues. But yeah, thank you all very much for your time. Recording of this will be going out in the next week or so, so be on the lookout for that. Let us know if we can help at all. Thanks again. We have an educational webinar coming up in about 9 days, I believe. So be on the lookout for that as well. Please join us for that. But in the meantime, happy scanning. Thank you.